I get this comment a lot, but for some reason, many consider American actor Adam Driver to be a case of unconventional beauty. Someone that is attractive despite not having the archetypal Hollywood face. I disagree that there is such thing as conventional and unconventional beauty, because these terms create misnomers and cause confusion. Rather, facial attractiveness and genetic health is determined much more simply with symmetry, proportion, and facial dimorphism. As I'll come to explain in this video with Adam's face, he passes 2 of these 3 categories, whereas most Hollywood stars pass all 3 with flying colors. This is what the ordinary person would consider to be unconventional beauty, but the word beauty in itself implies that he's still attractive. Not all features rank equal for attraction for men and women, and some harm your aesthetic more than others. Being relatively recently cast as the dark and foreboding Kylo Ren, Adam Driver is a very large and wide person, so it makes sense that his face would be so too. In FB90's Guidelines for Clinical Aesthetics, he proposes that the human facial length is 1/10 of their standing height. Although I have no way of scaling and measuring the length from the photos, standing at 190 centimeters, his face is spot on to what a 19 centimeter face looks like from experience. Also, given that his hairline hasn't moved backwards at 36, helps his face stay in this proportion. From the image, and many others like it, it's clear to see that he has broad shoulders and a thick neck, both of which are strongly masculine dimorphic traits that few men actually have. Moving on, Adam's nose has a very unique shape. From a side view, it has a long projection outwards, which itself widens the dorsal base. Men normally have a wider dorsal base than women, but with Adam's dorsal bridge being narrow at the top, this long, slender shape is only made more apparent. We'll use Jon Hamm, who I feel is a very close comparison by facial height and dimorphism, what one would consider quote-unquote conventionally attractive. His dorsal width widens out towards the bottom, whereas Adam's stays the same width throughout, which is far less common and, in my opinion, makes him look much more sophisticated. Not to mention, it's much longer than a model with perfect proportions, which is another defining aspect of his aesthetic. Another reason that Adam's nose is such a salient aspect of his face is because of the asymmetry on either side. Larger noses tend to be more crooked, as a considerable portion of the nose builds upon soft cartilage instead of hard bony support. His nasal contour isn't straight, the nose wings are asymmetrically aligned, and the nasal tip is biased towards his right. As humans, asymmetry is one of the first things we notice on a face as we determine genetic health based upon it. Although we can't always pinpoint it without artist-like detail, we register it as something feeling off, or in this case, unconventional beauty. Moving on, let's talk about proportion. In Mommert's 2016 study of the ideal male jaw, he provided 3 proportion guidelines to recreate the top-rated jaw shapes. The first one being that the gonion of the jaw passes through the mouth corners, the gonion being typically the outermost lateral part of the jaw, where from his side photos it's clear to see that it does indeed pass through. The second recommendation is that the jaw width, the bigonial width, should be 90% of the facial width, or the bizygomatic width, which even without accurate measurements is very clearly the case here. Lastly, the angle formed between the nose and lateral eye corner should be ideally the same as the jaw inclination. In Adam's case, they're not perfectly parallel, but still closer than most men. It's safe to assume that his jaw is very proportionate from the front at least. Being 36 years old, he's done a remarkable job of keeping his hairline healthy. In doing so, his facial thirds aren't exactly perfect, with his upper third being shorter than the mid-face. However, this actually works to his favor, as a shorter forehead is a juvenile trait, and considering that he has many masculine features such as his nose and jaw, it keeps his face looking young and boyish. A good comparison here would be Adrien Brody, who is also regarded as unconventionally attractive. When his hairline was in check for the last 2 decades, he was handsome, but as it moved backwards with age, the roundness of his upper third became apparent, and this acted against his features rather than complementing them. Instead of looking like a mature, well put together man, it becomes a strange mix of baby-faced features on an aging face. The hairline is incredibly important for both genders because it frames the face. To Adam's credit, he does make his face work with good transverse proportions. Given that he has wide, narrow, deep-set eyes, which are the masculine ideal, it balances the distribution of his features across his wider than average face. The long hair suits him incredibly well because without it, his ears stick out a lot, having an unaesthetic helix mastoid angle. We've already covered a full breakdown on ear anatomy here, so to understand what that means for aesthetics, click on the link. In virtually all of his photos, his ears are covered by hair, which brings his transverse proportion, at the ears at least, inwards, as we can't see them anymore, and makes his face near ideal. Without the hair, they would otherwise be very disproportionate. A number 2 fade on the sides every week is not the answer for every single guy, despite what men's influencers try to convince you otherwise. That being said, his face does have some facial flaws too. With age, submental and platysmal fat increases with weight gain, making the jaw appear less defined and robust. This can be improved by getting leaner overall, or with surgery in the case of over-enlarged glands or a low hyoid bone. I've already mentioned that his eyes are aesthetically shaped, but to go deeper, he has a very projected brow ridge, and notable supraorbital ridge that's sticking out here, where supra means above and orbital refers to the eye socket. In the latest Defining Beauty video, we covered that this forehead feature is a robust facial trait that's left over from our high testosterone Neanderthal cousins. This brow ridge makes the forehead overly masculine, which harms his proportion by giving his face a posterior facial plane, where his jaw is recessed behind the brow. Although his jaw isn't weak per se, as we've already established, it's weak in comparison to his brow, and in relation to the face overall. In Photoshop, I tried correcting these flaws by first shaving down the supraorbital ridge to be flatter and more resemblant of the modern brow shape. Then sliding the jaw forwards by only a few millimeters so that it's in line with the brow and creates a neutral facial plane makes a huge difference to aesthetic appeal. Lastly, the nose was brought down to size using the aesthetic E-line test, where a line drawn from the nose tip to the chin should be within a certain distance away from the lips. There are other measures to test nose projection and harmony, but this was just a rough guess. Some skin retouching was done because blemishes do indeed hurt appearances, and the submental fat that I just mentioned was removed visually. The final morph isn't excessive in that it still looks like Adam Driver, and granted there are still things to truly make him next level, this is something that's achievable with surgery and a little bit of effort. If you enjoy facial morphs, be sure to follow @KuzStudio on Instagram, or get a facial aesthetics report over at our website kuz.com, which does have a morph in itself. To summarize what unconventional beauty actually is, at the beginning of the video I mentioned that attraction is based on foundations of symmetry, averageness, dimorphism, and proportion. These are the so-called conventions that we assess conventionally attractive people by. When we say unconventionally attractive, it's implying that they don't pass these conventions and follow a different set of rules, which I disagree with. Biologically, these are the things that we as humans look for in determining facial attraction, and if you want proof, there's an entire series for citations on research papers. Adam is attractive within these conventions. Much like Adrian Brody and the list of quote-unquote unconventionally attractive stars, these people aesthetically are all still above average from your regular person. Adam's face has a lot of proportion by facial thirds and fifths, but a few disproportions in his side profile. It has a lot of symmetry, but a few notable asymmetries at its nose. It has very strong masculine dimorphic traits, such as the brow ridge and jaw, but a few feminine ones such as his low hairline. It's mostly coinophilically average, but has some skin blemishes, which is not average. In his case, men can get away with a wider range of nose sizes and shapes due to sexual dimorphism, where they have larger noses with straighter contours than their female counterparts. Likewise, women can get away with a greater range of eye shapes where cosmetic flaws like scleral show, can be considered cute and endearing Bambi eyes that make the eyes rounder and more feminine. For Adam, the point that he's lacking the most in, and I'll be frank in saying that his nose does not suit his side profile very well, is also the part that men are judged less harshly on, and so it's not as meaningful to his aesthetic appeal. It's easier to discern what's attractive in men like Jon Hamm or Brad Pitt, who are conventionally attractive. Unconventionally attractive means that you cannot pinpoint what makes them attractive unless you understand the more subtle psychological nuances in how we've come to perceive faces. Regardless, they're both compared against the same conventional standards. The best comparison would be fine art, where it takes a certain level of understanding to know what to look for, what to change, what should be there, and what shouldn't be there.